Hey there, Suzi here. Before we get into today's episode, I want to share this special message with you. Now, my co-host Michelle and I love masterminds. Not only do we belong to masterminds, but we also host a mastermind. We started it almost 8 years ago, and it is the premier mastermind for women business owners who want to grow their business with a specific focus on marketing. Now, this group is usually completely booked out, and very occasionally we open the doors and invite a handful of women in. So if you're growing your business, but you're struggling with feeling overwhelmed, or like you constantly have a split focus when it comes to your marketing, this could be exactly what you're looking for. We have an amazing time together, and the women in the group are extraordinary. They're great cheerleaders, supporters, advisors, and colleagues for you. And they're also seeing extraordinary results. We see people cracking the $1 million, $2 million, $3 million mark, launching new e-commerce sites that go from $0 to $10,000 a month in sales. They're doubling their conversion rates, they're growing memberships, they're selling courses, they're growing their personal brands, and they're getting all kinds of media exposure and speaking opportunities and so much more. You can learn more about the mastermind and join the wait list over at herbusinessmastermind.com. We're going to open the doors soon, so you definitely want to be on the list to get an invitation. So head on over to herbusinessmastermind.com. Create content that attracts, converts, and keeps your ideal clients. This is Content Sells. Hi, you're listening to the Content Sells podcast, the show all about how to create content to attract, convert, and keep your ideal clients. Welcome to episode 176. I'm Suzi Dafnis. Here with me is my co-host, Michelle Falzon. Hey, Michelle, how are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks, Suzi. How are you doing?
I'm really, really good. I'm especially looking forward to a very special guest we have coming up on today's show. Now, if you listened to the last episode, 175, not you, Michelle, our listeners, you may have heard us say that we were going to cover a specific topic today. But when the opportunity came about for us to interview this guest, we wanted to bring this show to you as soon as possible. And we figured it would be a great one to kick off the new year. So this is someone who's really pioneered online marketing. He's one of the original people to figure out how to sell things online back when technology was really raw and new, and very few people were actually making a living selling their expertise online at that time. Fast forward to today, and this is a booming multi-billion-dollar industry. But when our guest first started, he was one of the very first people to ever have $1 million launch. So what that means is off of one promotion, he brought in $1 million in revenue. Then he started teaching others how to do the same thing using a process he developed where you add value before you ask for the sale. And since that time, he's become the go-to expert on how to do online launches. And of course, we're talking about none other, Michelle, than the New York Times best-selling author and OG of online marketing, Mr. Jeff Walker.
Yes, and I'm so excited that we're chatting with Jeff today. As you know, Suzi, Jeff has been a mentor of mine for many years, someone over that time who's become a friend and a colleague. And of course, like you said, he has just helped millions of people all over the world. And I've been lucky enough to be part of a small group mastermind that Jeff has run, and I've been part of that for the last several years. And anyone who's listened to this show for any length of time has likely heard me refer to this mastermind that I head to 3 times a year to the US, or in recent times that I've been tuning in via Zoom for. And this is the mastermind with Jeff and some other amazing entrepreneurs. So this is a really special one for me today.
Yeah, and Jeff's impact has truly been global. And I know for me, we've used Jeff's product launch formula here at Her Business to launch multiple programs. And we use this formula multiple times a year. And I believe in this framework so much that, as Michelle knows, I recently made Jeff's latest update to his best-selling book, which is called Launch, our book club month. And the book club is something we do for our Her Business Network members, where each quarter I choose a book and I send it out to our members, and then we study that book as our book club book. So just recently, I sent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of copies of Jeff's books to our members, and they are absolutely loving it because Launch is it's been out for a while. It's been a New York Times bestseller. This updated edition is just that much more valuable, very up to date, and very, very practical. So whether you are, Disney launching a new movie, or you're a stylist putting together a new program, or you're doing a new in-store promotion in your florist store, his strategy works. And so we're going to put a link in today's show notes where you can go ahead and get that latest edition of his book.
Absolutely. And before we get into the interview with Jeff, I just wanted to share a few extracts from his illustrious bio. He is the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller that Suzi was just referring to, Launch. He teaches people how to launch online courses, products, services, and brands online. And his first online business was in 1996, and he pioneered the very idea of the online launch. His product launch formula, the program that he launched at that time, transformed the online marketing world from the day it was released back in 2005. And Jeff and PLF, which is the short acronym for Product Launch Formula, they've never slowed down since. Now, nearly 2 decades later, the Product Launch Formula brand is the gold standard in online entrepreneurial marketing. And his students and clients have done over $1 billion, that's billion with a B, in launches in hundreds of niches, and the weirdest, most amazing niches this works in, and markets, and of course dozens and dozens of countries around the world. And Jeff hangs out, he chooses to live in Durango, Colorado, because he can live anywhere, and that is the place he chose. And I can vouch, it is a really beautiful part of the world to live, right in some of the most picturesque parts of the Rocky Mountains. And Jeff's a real nature lover, so he can get out and do skiing and hiking and cycling trails. And Jeff's been married to his lovely wife, Mary, for decades. He's got 2 amazing kids, Dan and Joan. And Jeff says he's no longer quite as fast as his kids on skis or mountain bikes, but they still let him come along for the ride. And I hope my kids keep bringing me along for the ride too.
Very good. Let's go ahead and check out this conversation with Jeff Walker. Hey, Jeff, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited about this.
We are very, very excited, not only because both Michelle and I know what an amazing book it is and have both read it. Obviously, Michelle knows you and your work extremely well, but also we have featured the book as a book club book, as I mentioned just in the introduction of this episode. And so I know our members are absolutely going to love it. But tell us, because not everyone knows. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you for featuring your book club. I was super touched and just really excited about that. That was fantastic.
I love to introduce masters to our community, and you are widely regarded as one of the originals when it comes to online marketing and pioneering a marketing strategy that, while it's quite well known now, started back, with this inception in your own business. It's called the Product Launch Formula. It's used the world over to literally generate millions of dollars for thousands of clients of yours. Can you give our listener a sense of what Product Launch Formula, or PLF as it's more widely known, what is it?
It's a process of bringing out a new offer, whatever it is. If you've got an online course, a membership site, a mastermind, a coaching program, whatever it is, a book, a piece of art, it's a way of rolling it out that gets people excited without having them feel like they're sold really hard. It's about delivering value out of the launch. If you think about a launch, the companies that do it really well, if you look at Hollywood, they do it incredibly with a film, whereas they get people excited long before that film is coming out, if they do it right. They'll release it used to be like one trailer came out a few months before. Now it's a trailer comes out a year ahead of time, and then another trailer, and often a third trailer. And then right before the film comes out, all of a sudden the actors are appearing on all the podcasts and all the talk shows, and they're getting people excited before that film even comes out. If you look at the way the gaming industry does it, they're extraordinary at this. If you look at how Apple releases a new product, it's not just one day all of a sudden the new iPhone appears in the stores. No, there's rumors leading up to it for months. And those rumors are not they're not an accident. It's all orchestrated by Apple. And then as you get closer, then there's rumors of the announcement event. And then there's the announcement event, but you can't buy it yet. There's still going to be another week or two. And what they're doing is they're building the anticipation ahead of the launch. And no one's talking about, boy, I'm being sold this iPhone 2 weeks ahead of time when they're reading all these rumors. And so if you take the way the bigger companies launch and you translate it into the way our kind of businesses do it, and most of my clients they're either solopreneurs or they have very, very small teams. A lot of them are just starting out. A lot of them might be very uncomfortable with selling. This is a way that you get people excited about your product before it's even available, build up the anticipation for it, and start the pre-sale process where you can deliver a lot of value ahead of time and do it in a non-slimy way, in a way that makes sense for people that aren't just natural born salespeople. And yeah, I came across, I developed this process. I've been on, you mentioned I was like one of the OGs. I started my first online business in 1996. I didn't know anything about sales. I didn't know anything about marketing. I was just I was a stay-at-home dad at the time, taking care of 2 small kids and with my wife supporting the family. And we needed a change in the family. And I put together, it's a long story, but the short story is I put together an offer. At the time I had newsletters about the stock market, put together an offer, but really didn't know how to sell. So I went through this elaborate romancing process that effectively is what we now call a pre-launch. And it worked, even though I had no experience with sales whatsoever. And then that was in 1997 was that first launch. And I've been developing ever since. And the interesting thing is my instincts back then as a non-salesperson who I just wanted to make people feel good about the sales process. I didn't want them to hate me when I asked them for the order. That naturally led me into this process that creates great value ahead of time, and you can do it with a lot of congruency and a lot of authenticity and integrity, and that's where I was a little bit ahead of the market. Because the world is tilted that way ever more so towards more transparency and integrity and congruency in your sales.
The entire process is, of course, outlined inside of your book launch. And you mentioned Disney, you mentioned Apple, but you mentioned also that a lot of your clients are solopreneurs, or what we at Her Business call micropreneurs. So how complex does a launch need to be? Because we see some of these multi-million-dollar launches with online marketers, many of whom you would know, and it's like, as a small business owner, how on earth am I going to do that? Does it have to be complex?
No, it doesn't. It's a great question. And a lot of times it's something I have to deal with, because when people look at me going through like one of my launches, they're like, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot going on. You're doing these live broadcasts. You're teaching for hours and hours and hours. And there's a whole team behind it. And I could never do that. But the reality is that my first launches were done via email, 100% via email, because there was no video back then. There was no live broadcasts. There wasn't even audio online.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, putting photos online was hard back then. Seriously. I mean, it was literally hard to put a photo online back then. And so I did it via email then. Well, the reality is email still works really, really well to do a launch. And I have to, like in my marketing and a lot of the big prominent teachers online, especially people that are teaching entrepreneurship, we're playing in this, it's almost like the big leagues. Like we're going to be compared against our peers. And so we have to go super pro and super high production. But in most markets, you don't need to, and you can keep it simple. And I am a huge fan of simplicity. In fact, I've had tens of thousands of students have gone through my paid training. I've had over 1 million students go through my free training. Mm. And I think probably the greatest skill I have as a teacher and trainer is keeping stuff simple, is making stuff simple. And I think that's actually something everyone should aspire to, mm-hmm. As a trainer or a teacher. Is simplicity is what lies on the other side of true expertise, true professionalism, true genius.
I love that. Thank you.
Mm. So, Jeff, I'd love to go back to something that you just said about how you were kind of,
or it could be with simple videos.
Oh, did we lose you for a sec?
You might, you could have. My thing just, because it's, yeah, I don't know.
We're
No
good.
worries.
We're good.
We're good.
Very good.
Hey, I'd love to go back to what you were saying about, the concern you had about being salesy and how you kind of almost delayed the sale a little bit to do this elaborate sort of romance beforehand. And I want to talk about trust and authority, because following the PLF process is one of the most powerful ways for a business owner to build trust and authority in their market. And can we just chat a bit about why that is and why it matters when we're asking someone to buy from us? That whole kind of pre-launch build up and building that trust and authority. Why does that matter?
Yeah, I was scared to ask for the order. Absolutely, in that first launch. And I had a bunch of people that have been watching I had a free newsletter. And like I said, I was a stay-at-home dad. I had nothing going on in my life professionally. And all of a sudden I had these people starting to subscribe to my newsletter, and I felt like they loved me. They would write back to me. They would say nice things to me. And I thought, if I ask them for money, they're going to hate me. And so that was, I did, Michelle, I delayed asking, doing that launch because it took so long to build this up. But on the other hand, we were desperate to make some more money. So authority and trust, the reality is anything we're selling, we're going to make, we're making some kind of transformation for the people who buy from us. There'll be some transformation in their life. We're either giving them more pleasure or reducing pain. Everything we sell does that. Even if you're selling a painting, we all do that. And so, but especially like I imagine a lot of the folks watching will have some type of a teaching or training product, whether it's teaching people how to have a better relationship or how to lose weight or create a meditation practice or quit smoking or have a better golf swing. In this space, for someone to invest their money and their time and their effort and their life force into you to say, yeah, they're basically saying, I believe you. I believe you when you're talking about these results. I believe that you can deliver these results. Not only that you can deliver these results, but you can deliver them to me, even though I've been on 14 diets and none of them worked, or I've tried 12 different quit smoking programs and none of them worked. Now I'm going to believe in you. So that's the chasm we have to jump over to get someone to buy from us. And even though I want to encourage everyone to create a business, I'm all about entrepreneurs. And I think this process that I've put together and refined over all these years makes it easier than any other process. At the end of the day, it is a big chasm that we're asking people to step over. Mm-hmm. And they can't even begin to do that unless A, they trust you, mm-hmm. and B, before they can trust you, they have to see you as a credible, authoritative figure. And when we say authority, it's not like you're commanding them. It's not like you're like some kind of a general, giving orders, but they see you as someone that can help them. They trust that you have that expertise. And when we talk about trust, first they have to trust you, believe you, that you're not just outright lying. That's the first level of trust. Then the second level of trust is they have to believe that whatever you're selling, here's this, how to have a great yoga practice training series. They have to believe that, you've got this process that works. Then they have to believe that you can actually teach that process. And then they have to believe that you can teach it to them and it will work for them. And that last one's probably the hardest one, because most people are walking around with the story in their heads of, I failed. It's not going to work for me. It might work for other people, but it won't work for me because of this, this, and this. And so you have to develop that authority. And you have to develop that trust. And it doesn't generally come overnight.
You gave us some examples of both products and services. And while it's called the product launch formula, of course, it works for products and services. And in the book Launch, you do give a number of examples where people have used this system to generate sales, whether it was, 5 figures, 6 figures, 7 figures, etc. Would you mind just sharing a couple of stories, perhaps one product, one service, or whatever you'd care to share with us to give us an example?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so one that's interesting, it's sort of a blend of both, is Amy Small. And Amy has her business is all about knitting. And so she sells custom made yarn, really crazy, amazing custom made yarn. And also she'll sell a knit along. So you buy the yarn, but you also get to participate in this knit along and knit a sweater. And everyone goes through this as a community and knits this sweater. And Amy has done some incredible launches, absolutely incredible launches, including recently she did one where she made $100,000 in sales in the first hour. In the first hour of the launch. It's just nuts. I mean, I forget the total number of sales for the launch, but I think it was $300,000 or $400,000.
Fantastic.
And this is for yarn. And it is, and it's not the kind of yarn you go down to Walmart and get. It's custom, really exquisite yarn. But at the end of the day, it's yarn, and she's got people that are so crazy to get this yarn and to participate in her community, and her community just loves it. And so it's just a remarkable story. And one interesting thing about that is, I talked about transformation, and you're like, well, how does yarn? Where's the transformation in buying yarn? Well, the real transformation she is selling is that people get to make this sweater, and they make it within the community. And knitting a sweater. Now, I don't knit, but from my understanding, is doing one of these sweaters is like it's hard. And if you can take someone through doing something hard and have them accomplish it, that's an incredible transformation that will echo through every area of their life. That's confidence. That's accomplishment. So that's huge. Another one that I love is Anne LaFollette, who is early 60s. She was laid off in her late 50s. She was very successful in the corporate world. And then just one day she was downsized from a very successful career, went home, didn't know what she was going to do, but always had an interest in art. So she started doing this thing called surface pattern design, which is where you use Adobe Illustrator to make these repeating patterns like doodles, and you turn it into a repeating pattern, and then you license that out into the world. It could be used on coffee cups or mouse pads or iPad covers or anything. And again, Anne has had just tremendous success. She did, her first year was sort of her pilot year, and she did like $25,000 in sales. Her second year, she hit $100,000 in sales. Third year, $400,000 in sales, selling a course, an online course on how to do this surface pattern design. Michael Walker, no relation, teaches musicians how to be successful musicians. Before COVID, it was how to be successful touring musicians. And he was a very successful touring musician, but he basically sells a coaching service where he'll walk people through how to build up their presence as a touring or as a professional musician, and has had just tremendous success, built a business in just a few years from nothing, no following, nothing, just using Facebook ads, $3 a day, I think it was $3 or $4 a day in ads, and has gradually in about 3 or 4 years built that up into a business that's does over $1 million in sales per year. So there's just a few examples that we could go on, but it's every market and every niche. Now, those 3 folks I mentioned were all from the States, but there are people everywhere, every language, every continent. I don't know about Antarctica, but every other continent who are just absolutely crushing it.
Yeah, fantastic. And I know here in Australia, where Michelle and I are based, many, many graduates of your programs, many people using this exact formula. And now that the book is in the hands of all our Her Business Network members, there'll be a whole lot more. So I'm very excited to give you more success stories.
I'm always amazed at the variety of niches that it works in, the types of businesses. I mean, it's just incredible. It seems to be the universal formula for, bringing something to the market, getting people's attention, and then getting them wanting to buy from you. And I want to go back. I can't seem to let go of this pre-launch part of the process, Jeff. let's talk about this process. You've got a very specific, you've mentioned over the years, you've dialed it in, you've refined it, but there is this very fundamental structure to the pre-launch, and it follows kind of like you liken it to sort of like a 3-act play. Can you speak to a little bit to this pre-launch structure? How does it, what's the shape of it? What does it look like if I was going to do this?
Absolutely. So, that 3-act play is something that's existed for a very, very long time, and it works, right? There's a reason that plays and movies follow these structures. And there's a lot of storytelling that generally happens in launches. And so why not mirror a successful story formula that goes back hundreds or thousands of years? So in our pre-launch, there's typically 3 pieces of pre-launch content. So the pre-launch content is the content you release ahead of the sale. And I see, like, when you see people that are just like natural born salespeople or natural born marketers, they'll make a mistake here. What they'll do is they'll take their sales process and they'll split it into 3 chunks and release those 3 chunks and thinking that's the way to make the sale. That's not it. What it is you're delivering value ahead of time. And the process goes like this. The first piece is about the opportunity. And so I talked about this earlier. Everyone, there's an opportunity for them to have a better life. Less pain, more pleasure. Quit smoking, create the meditation practice. Grow big tomatoes, have a better tennis swing. And so the first piece is about this idea that there is an opportunity for them to change their lives in a significant way and have a better life. And that's that first piece of content. The second piece of content is all about, if the first piece is sort of almost like this external possibility that yes, people can have their lives changed. They can have that better tennis swing, or they can have more of their first serves in. And here's sort of how it happens. The second one is what we call the transformation. And this is a subtle difference between the opportunity and transformation, but the transformation is making it more internal for people so that they can start to see that change in their lives. And often in the second piece, there might be case studies. There's often a teaching piece. If you can teach, well, all through here, you're teaching. But in that second piece, if you can give them a quick win, so they can be just like, and it doesn't have to be like a monumental win, but a quick win, so they can see that transformation start to happen, or they can at least visualize it. That's the second piece of pre-launch content. The third piece is what we call ownership. And this is where it's all about them taking ownership of that future change in themselves. And it's also about where you start talking about them taking ownership of your program or your product or your service or your training or your membership. So that's like the 3-act play. That's the pre-launch content. That's the pre-launch sequence. And then that will lead into what we call the open cart sequence. The next piece is where you actually open up the open cart is you open your shopping cart and you start to take orders. And that's all about enrollment and getting them to enroll in their future selves, and also enroll in your offer.
Yeah, it's such a great explanation. I really like the distinction too between the external kind of opportunity and the internal transformation. I think that's a really powerful distinction for people. And I just want to clarify too that these 3 pieces of content, like you were alluding to before, that could be an email, it could be a video, it can be any kind of content. It's really just that it follows that particular structure, and you're giving value before the sale.
Yeah, we've been using that for, when I say we, it sounds like the royal we. Well, I do have a team now, but the reality is I've got thousands and thousands and thousands of students that are following this. And I do have to also say, I didn't invent all this on my own. I felt like I invented the first 10%, and then I started teaching it, and then my students would innovate, and they would bring things back to me, and I've almost become the aggregator these days. But it can be any number of different formats. We've kept that format I've been teaching this for 16 years now as part of a course. I started actually teaching people before that, just as a friend's basis. Video didn't exist back then. Audio didn't exist. But as the tools have developed, we started to use all these tools. Social media didn't exist back then. Now we use social. Paid traffic as it exists now did not exist back then. But we started using that. Something that I personally have leaned into in the last few years is live broadcasts. So I don't know, maybe in 2010, I started using video and I had to figure out how to do video. Just figured it out. And then I think in 18, we went to live broadcast. So I do these now, all the pre-launch for me personally, I do via live broadcast because I tend to do pretty well in a live environment. But people can use video, they can use email. One of the interesting things is when I started doing video or live broadcasts, I'm like, okay, this is only for the absolute pros. This is like, you have to be like so experienced and have so much technology. And because 4 years ago, you needed a lot of technology. This is only for the absolute pros. I'm not even going to teach this because it's so advanced. And then I was just telling you about Anne La Follette, and she's, I think, early 60s now. And when she started out, she started doing live video, and she had no audience whatsoever. She had her audience, or in our world, we call it a list, which would be the people that are following you, actually the email list you have, but you could also expand it to include any social following. Well, her entire audience was literally zero because she'd been working for big corporate companies her whole life. And so, but she saw this, she saw the formula. She's like, I'm going to do this. So she started doing a live broadcast every week. And she said, since she had an audience of zero, initially it was just her cousin would watch her, and she would do a live on Facebook and her cousin would watch. Awesome. And she said she was just getting used to talking to the green dot. Like right now, there's a green dot, like right there's a green, the camera, she's talking to the green dot, and her cousin Katie would watch every week. And she just got more comfortable with it. And then she started spending just a little bit of money on Facebook ads and started to grow an audience ever so gradually. And then she just eventually built up a bit of an audience, and she did her launch 100% via live broadcasts. And so here was me thinking this is only for the absolute experts, and Anne just proved me completely wrong. So, it's about finding the media that fits for you. Some people are great with writing. I think most people in general, I think of it this way. I think of sales as being enthusiasm transfer. You're transferring your enthusiasm.
I love that
for your thing. And if you think about it that way, it's like if you just went and saw like the greatest movie, the most amazing movie, and you went and then you met up for lunch with one of your friends, and you're telling your friend, you got to see this video, this movie. It's just absolutely amazing. Or maybe it's a YouTube video. You got to check this out. It's absolutely amazing. That's enthusiasm transfer. And I think most people, if they have something that really moves them, I just saw this incredible Van Gogh exhibit that was just mind blowing. It was all his work turned into video that filled all the walls in the room. It was just, it was in Phoenix. Okay. It was breathtaking. I can't stop talking about it. I tell everyone about it. And that's the way you want to be about your offer, whatever it is. And I'm sort of on a tangent here, but I think for most people, it's easier to transfer that enthusiasm when you're doing it via video or for a live broadcast than in writing. I think for most people will struggle to make that kind of connection and have that enthusiasm in writing. So for most people, I think these days the answer is either recorded video or live broadcasts.
I love that. And I did not get to see that exhibition, and it was here in Australia at one point, but it's on my list. Now, one of the things that you mentioned,
so cool.
It was mind-blowing. What people create is incredible.
Yeah.
One of the things that you did say is there's some things that weren't available when you first started doing a PLF. And I know that in the new version of the book, the updated version, so even if you have the old version, you're listening or watching, there is a whole new section on social media. And so, you've really brought the book totally up to date with what's available at that point of writing. And we know things change quickly. Now, we've built up our authority. We've given people all this value using your 3-part formula of opportunity, transformation, and ownership. And now it's time to do what you refer to as open cart. And you mentioned it a minute. And this is such an important part because we can give all the value, get people to know, like, and trust us. But until we ask for the sale, nothing happens. So could you give us a few of your top tips for making the most of that open cart period?
Yeah. So, Suzi, that's a great question, because this is one of the things that has changed in the bigger overall strategic picture of product launch formulas. The open cart, it used to be, we do 3 videos, and then we'd open up, and there's another video saying, here's my offer. This is what it costs. This is what you get. This is what it costs. And then you'd send a whole bunch of emails for that week. That used to be there. Essentially, there was no open cart sequence. It was just send a bunch of emails. Okay. And it worked really, really well, but things evolve. And so these days, the open cart's become its own sequence. I recommend it's 5 days has been working really well for me, maximum of 7 days. If you go beyond 7 days, you run out of stuff to talk about, and you end up just sending another email and putting up another social that says, buy my stuff. It's still available. Please buy my stuff. Please, it's still available. and you run out of stuff to say. It doesn't look good. There's no. So another thing, you have to have a definitive end to the launch. There's a period of time. Like I said, 5 days is what I've been using recently. 7 days maximum. Some people go shorter than 5 days, but that's more of an expert move, frankly, because 5 days gives you enough time. If things aren't going great, it gives you enough time to course correct. And so during that time, there's a number of things you can do. First of all, let me back up. There has to be a definitive end to the launch because people need a deadline. And so the end to the launch is either that the price is going to go up after the launch. I mean, we're all familiar with this. We've seen grand openings. We've seen all kinds of things like that. There's a definitive end. So either the price goes up or certain bonuses go away. There's something that extra that comes with the offer that you won't get if you don't buy by such and such a time, or the offer completely comes off the market and it's not available anymore. So it's your choice which of those 3. You could use more than one of those 3, but you have to use at least one of those 3. And so the way I say this, and it sounds silly, but something bad has to happen if they don't buy by the end of the launch. And the reason I say, a lot of people can be squeamish about this. They think, I don't want to stop the sales. This is great. Sales are coming in. Or I just doesn't feel right. Or I don't want to, it feels icky to have this deadline. Well, if you don't want a deadline, that's fine. But your sales, you'll literally cut your sales in half. It's the difference between doing a $20,000 launch and a $10,000 launch. It's the difference between doing a $100,000 launch and a $50,000 launch. That's just the reality. And this is just data I've seen from hundreds and hundreds of launches that I've been able to see the insides of. Because on that last day is when you'll typically see anywhere from 40 to 50% of your sales. So definitive end and a definitive beginning to the launch. And so at the beginning of the launch, it's very simple. You've built up this excitement through your pre-launch. People are ready to buy, and it's just a simple email that, okay, we're open now. Go here, send them to a page. That page will have details about the offer, whether it's a sales video or a sales letter or both of those things. But it basically gives the details. It tells people what they're going to get, why they should get it, how it's going to transform their life. It's still, you still have to do the hard work of putting together a good sales message that's very, very compelling, even though you've had that pre-launch. It doesn't obviate the need to put together a compelling message. And you have to tell people how to buy, what they're going to get, the details, take them through the process, take them to an order form, and literally walk them across the goal line. So that's day one. It's just here's a short email to the sales video or sales letter. Day 2, and that's day 1. Let's call it a 5-day cart. Day 5 is we're closing down. You need to buy today. And it's basically just simple email messages that day. The 3 days in between could be any number of things. One thing I like to do is deliver another piece of content. Like typically on day 2, I might do another live stream or another video that teaches another piece of content. But it's a short, distinct, standalone piece of content that moves people towards the sale. In other words, you don't go, Suzi.
Is it a repeat of what you've already seen in the pre-launch, or this is
generally
an adjunct?
It's usually an adjunct to the way I've done it. I mean, yes, you could do it. I'll talk about a webinar in just a second. But usually it's an adjunct, but it's a bite-sized piece. And it's not something like new and meaty that all of a sudden people have to think about this really meaty thing. And how am I going to, you don't want to get them spinning in their heads about something new. During CART week, it's all about moving towards enrollment. So for instance, when I do my launch, I have a course that teaches all this, right? That teaches how to do a launch. And so the piece I might have would be often in my pre-launch, I'll teach the whole pre-launch piece, the sequences, but I won't teach the actual open CART piece. But then during my open CART, I'll be, there's one more sequence I want to teach you. And here it's this open CART sequence, and I'll teach it in 15 minutes. And it's just so it happens that since I'm teaching about open CART, I'm like, and by the way, we are actually in open CART, and now's the time to buy because you've only got a couple of days, and the button's right down below. But it's a standalone piece that I can teach in 15 minutes. And so now so that's one thing you could do is a piece of content. Another thing you could do is, I'm going to say a webinar, but what actually a webinar is these days to me is a little bit in flux. It used to be a webinar was a bunch of a PowerPoint presentation with a voiceover. Now people use a webinar to mean any number of things, but you could do a webinar, it could be slides, it could be a live broadcast, but it could be a compressed version of what you shared during the pre-launch. So, the reality is not everyone's going to watch everything you deliver. And so you could do a compressed version of everything you shared in the pre-launch. Another thing you could do is just, I will always, in my open CART period, have some type of frequently asked questions. And you can do it. I've done it as a live broadcast. I've done it as a video. We do a fireside chat where I'm literally sitting next to a fireplace, just answering top questions. I've done it in text where people can just go to a big, long FAQ where we have 50 questions. But the key here is the questions and the answers are always about moving forward towards the sale. Yeah. So it's not about like some nuance of the part of the stuff you taught in pre-launch. This is about moving forward now, moving forward with enrollment. Another thing you do is if you had a membership site or a course or something, you could do a screen capture of going through the course or going through the membership site, do a screen capture and show what it looks like inside. A favorite is always going to be featuring case studies. I've done this I've done this via live streams. I've done it via video. This last launch, we released a page that had 80 some video case studies, like 15, 20-minute case studies. It would have taken people days to watch all 80 of these. In fact, there were so many, we actually had filters and search forms so they could pick like their niche. So let's see, those are some of the examples. We did a closing ceremonies in our last launch where our launch, it becomes such an event and we deliver so much material and build such a community that I think people going through it, whether they buy from us or not, whether they go any further, I think people just feel like they've just gone through an epic undertaking. And so it's like, well, the Olympics has a closing ceremony. We should have a closing ceremony. And so I had a closing and I invited all of my team on, and our team's up to like 40 people. So it was just my team introducing them, saying, hey, these are the folks that if you're going further with us, if you decided to enroll with us, these are the folks that are going to be supporting you. And having them share a little bit about what it was like to be behind the scenes and the success stories they've seen.
Very
so there's a lot that can be done. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So much gold in that.
There really is. And I think our listeners are probably realizing we're just scratching the surface here of the wisdom that Jeff has to share with us. And just listening to you, and I've had the privilege of listening to you for a long time. But it occurs to me that so much of the marketing success that you've had and the brilliance and the ideas all comes just back to being a good human. It comes back to being a good person, and common sense stuff. Hey, this is my team. These are these great people that I work with that you'll get to work with. So much of it is just about being a good human.
Thank you, Michelle. I super appreciate that. You know how much I appreciate you and how impactful you've been on my life. And the thing I just want to leave people with, because I know we're at time, is the world has moved away from the slick salesman, and it's tilted towards the people who are in service to others. And this process, it works. It's great marketing, but at the end of the day, great marketing is sharing your gifts with the world in a compelling fashion that gets people's attention and makes a real impact on them. And the reality is these days, you don't have to be slick. You don't have to be fancy. You just have to show up and serve, and you have to be able to articulate the way you're going to be able to impact people's lives. And it works, and anyone can have a great business.
The book is Launch: How to Sell Almost Anything Online, Build a Business You Love, and Live the Life of Your Dreams. Jeff, thank you so much for being our guest on the show today. Appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Suzi.
Oh, he's such a dream to listen to. Just love that.
Yes, so great. So wonderful. And just good to hear him go back over the basics and the fundamentals, because we're so much a fan of those basics, those foundation moves that, people get caught up in all the tricksy strategies and so on. But honestly, if you just do the very simple steps that he shared today, you don't have to get into the bells and whistles launches. It was pure gold.
Yeah. And I know that, inside of our membership, inside of our community, women are launching all the time. And the word launch, he really owns that word, but we hear it a lot. But not everybody understands the product launch formula system and the fact that this is a system, and the way systems typically work is you have to follow the process to the letter to get the output. Like whether it's in manufacturing or it's in marketing, launching is about following a particular process. And this is really essential. It's really essential, especially the first few times you do something. So when we've followed the formula, as you know, Michelle, we've very much gone, okay, how does this work exactly? We're going to just do exactly what he says. We're not going to deviate and come up with our own good ideas. We're going to do what, as you said, billions of dollars have been created from by following that system. And here's the thing, if you do this, know that you may not hit it out of the park, because there are nuances. There are layers and layers and layers and loads of experience. But what I know is inside the book, he really does walk you through it, and he gives you examples, and he gives you examples of people who have used that particular strategy or that particular part of that 3-part process to get those results. So it's definitely a system. And speaking of, sorry, were you going to say something?
Oh, no, go for it.
Speaking of those 3 stages, here's the thing, like we said on the podcast, on the outside, you can say, oh, yeah, people are sending out 3 videos. Yep, got it, I can do that. But he took us through those very distinct purposes. That first video is really about opportunity, and how do you demonstrate to people that they can have less pain and more pleasure? So a term I really, really enjoyed hearing. How do you give people even the idea, put it into their imagination that there's an opportunity for things to be different for them to be out of pain, emotional, psychological, financial, whatever it is, into more pleasure. And that the purpose of that first part of content is very different to the second, which is about transformation. And he told us how this bit was about giving them a quick win. This is about showing that you can help them by actually helping them. And so in that second piece of content, whether it's a video or an email or however, whether it's live or recorded, it's about giving them that quick win. But then the third piece, it has its own very distinct purpose, and he calls it ownership. And so they're taking ownership of the future change that they're going to see in their lives. And they also start to envision ownership of the thing you want them to buy. So at this point, you are really starting to ask for the sale in a subliminal kind of way. You're seeding the fact that there's something that they're going to be able to buy from you. And I think that is key. It's like if you've done the 3 videos, it didn't work, you want to go back. You want to look at the process very clearly, and you want to make sure that those pieces of content are following this well-proven strategy of having these 3 distinct purposes.
Right, because if you're not painting the picture of the opportunity and exciting people to think, oh my gosh, I could make $100,000 this year, or oh my gosh, I could finally, have the dream team that I've always wanted, or I could finally have that garden out the front looking the way it needs to, or I can finally have blonde hair, or hair-free legs, or whatever the thing is that you provide. If you're not exciting them with that, they're not going to press on and watch the next thing or read the next thing. And, I really love the foundation. The whole basis of all of this is adding value before you ask for the sale. And that is really what those 3 videos, or perhaps their 3 emails, or whatever they might be, that's what they are. And it was, as Jeff said, he was doing it to kind of like, he was afraid to ask for the sale. And so he kind of put this, no, let me give you a whole heap of value first. And of course, in the process, struck on the winning formula. And so for me, that idea that you're going to add value, but strategically, before you ask for the sale, and build in that reciprocity that we know is such a powerful factor in the influencing and persuading of others. That's kind of the guiding light for the whole product launch formula. Add value before you ask for the sale. I also really loved what he was talking about, this enthusiasm transfer. And I think that is another place that we kind of miss. And that is, we are so often so embroiled in our product, so down in the detail of our product or the service that we offer, and we've got our own degree of enthusiasm around it, but unlocking that enthusiasm in others. How can we do that? That is the magic of a launch. That's when a launch suddenly gets its own momentum and people start flocking to it and sharing it with their friends and so on. When you can find that way to transfer your enthusiasm to others, and then of course it becomes transferable to others and others and others, and you get this fantastic ripple effect. And I know on some launches it's incredibly exciting to watch how the numbers just keep ticking up. You can see there's 1,000 people have watched the video, and then there's 10,000, and then there's like all these hundreds and hundreds of comments, and it's quite an exciting thing when that enthusiasm transfer takes hold.
And if you haven't got hundreds of comments and thousands of people, whatever it is for your level, of launch, it's just having that activity happening. This is a lesson for me. It's like he was talking to me, and that is around keeping things simple. And I think sometimes, especially when we know our industry or we know our product and service so well, we can start to overcomplicate things. And he said, as teachers and trainers, our highest gift could be to aspire to make things simple for people. And one of my great mentors, Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that was one of his strengths too as a teacher, is that he would take something very complex like finances and bring it down to very, he could put it on one flip chart, the whole system and message that you would use to start to invest. And I think that we overcomplicate things. And so I say it's a message for me as well, because I can take something simple and sometimes make it complex. And our goal should be the other way around. And that is how can I make this messaging as simple as possible? And I know, Michelle, you and I both, we get together and we create something. Sometimes we can create, add to rather than stripping back.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for bringing Jeff to our world, Michelle. And thank you again to Jeff for being our guest here on the show today. We want to let you know where you can find out more about Jeff. And of course, we want to give you the details to go ahead and buy the book. Firstly, to learn more about Jeff and his programs, head over to jeffwalker.com. And he spells Jeff, Jeff. So it's jeffwalker.com. We'll also put a link to where you can buy the book, and his contact information and anything else we've referenced here on the show. We're going to put that over on our website at herbusiness.com/Jeff Walker. And once again, that is JEFFWALKER. So that's where you'll find more details. Now, we love having awesome guests. We've had some incredible guests on this show, Michelle. So good.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. It's quite remarkable looking back over all those beautiful faces and all that expertise.
Yeah, and we love sharing their tips and strategies with as many business owners as possible. So we would love it if you would do this. If you would head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating or review. If you enjoyed today's episode or any episode, if you would do that, that would be really great. And one person who just did that recently goes under the handle Lucy Baby. So Lucy said this: the value in this podcast is incredible. She put this over on Apple Podcast. She said, I stumbled across this today, and honestly, the value I've received is amazing. The content is applicable, tangible, and really easy to understand. Thank you so much, ladies. Well, thank you, Lucy, for listening. And we appreciate you heading over to Apple Podcasts and see what happened, Lucy. You get a shout out on the show. So you could be Lucy too. If you leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, we would love to give you a shout out. And if you're a business owner, which I know most of our listeners are, be sure to tell us what your business is because we'll give you a shout out as well. Now, before we go, Michelle, what do we have coming up in the next episode?
We're talking all things email newsletters on the next show, and in particular, 7 very specific mistakes that Suzi and I have seen variously committed on various newsletters, and we want to save you from those pitfalls. If you've got a newsletter right now, definitely tune in. If you're thinking about putting out a newsletter, definitely tune in. And even if you're not thinking about doing a newsletter, some of these mistakes are transferable to other things you're doing, like email marketing or how you're communicating on Facebook or other social platforms. So definitely one to check out.
That is coming out 2 weeks from this episode. So if you haven't already subscribed, then go ahead and subscribe, whether it's on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, wherever you are listening to your to this show. We want to thank you so much for listening. Michelle, anything you want to say before we go?
Just one more special thanks to Jeff Walker. Thank you for being a good human and for being here on the show with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you again to Jeff Walker. And please do yourself a favor and pick up a copy of Launch. We'll see you next time right here on the Content Sales Podcast. Bye for now.